Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. You're going to like this. So today, talking about war. A war you may not even be aware that America ever fought. It's called the Spanish-American War. Know who we're going to fight? Spoiler alert, Spain. It's Spanish-American War. So we're going to fight Spain in a war today. And it's ridiculous. And there's a whole bunch of crazy stories that come out of it. America will refer to this war as the Splendid Little War. Now, we're going to fight Spain. This is a disclaimer I have to do in U.S. history. It's called the Spanish-American War. Alright? That is different than the Mexican-American War that happened in the 1840s. Alright? So we're going to be in 1898 today. The Spanish-American War. Not the Mexican-American War. Yes, Mexico and Spain both speak Spanish. But they're two completely different wars with two completely different countries that are not involved with each other. So, mentally in this class, do not confuse the Mexican-American War with the Spanish-American War. Two completely different wars. I only say that because I've taught for a really long time, and it's a common occurrence that people mess it up on test questions. Anywho. Well, you're gonna get it wrong if you hear Spanish-American War and they're like, in Mexico they speak that Spanish, and you're going to misunderstand what the question is if you mix the wars up. Silly thing to me to clarify, but we're gonna do it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started today. You're gonna like this. All right, we're gonna do the whole war in a single lesson today. All right. And man, there's so many cool stories here. I could spend 2 or 3 lessons doing this. More, it's a war. There's a lot of moving parts. But you'll like it. All right. So let's start out. William McKinley is the president. All right. So, actually, we're going to get back. So William McKinley, we're going to talk about him a lot. He is the president of the United States. This here is Cuba. 90 miles off the coast of Florida. Cuba. Now, Cuba, if you know anything about Cuba, they speak Spanish. So, as we've talked about before, you can tell who originally colonized areas over here based on what language they speak. Cuba speaks Spanish. They were colonized by Spain. At this point in 1898, Spain still owns Cuba. All right? Now, the Monroe Doctrine, if you remember that, all right, said no new colonizations in the Western Hemisphere. Like James Monroe said, no more in the early 1800s. Well, Spain had owned Cuba for a really long time, so this wasn't an issue. We knew that Spain owned Cuba, and that's fine. Spain was a little firm-handed here with Cuba. They were kind of tough on them, but they leave us alone. We leave them alone. Who cares? Like we don't care. Well, the people in Cuba, the Cuban people, they started wanting to be left alone. They kind of wanted to be their own independent nation, all right? And they're like, hey, America, will you help us be our own independent nation? And we're like, no, because then we have to fight Spain, and pretty sure we can take them, but nah, don't want them. Like, and that was about it, all right? So there starts to be some rebellions and stuff in Cuba, Cubans fighting against the Spanish. Well, the Spanish, they're not going to play with that. So Spain sends over like their armada, which is their navy, which is big size navy. They send their armada over, they send their army over, and they basically put this whole little rebellion in Cuba on lockdown. They just shut it down. This should be a non-story. This should not be something that we talk about in a survey course of U.S. history. Except for yellow journalism. Remember those guys that we talked about? William Randolph Hearst, who will just say whatever he needs to sell newspapers? Well, he sees that there's a little kerfuffle, that's a word I just made up, a situation taking place here in Cuba, and hey, maybe he can sell some newspapers talking about that. So, in his newspapers, he starts talking about all of these horrific atrocities that are taking place in Cuba, about how Spain is down there killing babies and stuff. I'm not making that up. the amount of crazy stuff that he puts in his paper to convince people how horrific life is like in Cuba. Now, it's probably not great, but it's not nearly as bad as he's making out to be, because he's just making up stuff to try to sell papers. People don't know that. The American people don't realize that he is just making stuff up, and they're horrified by this imaginary treatment of what is happening to the Cubans in Cuba. So the American people are starting to get motivated to want to help out the Cubans. This is a cartoon that gets, let me move myself. This is a little cartoon. I'll make myself a little smaller here so you can see it. Basically, that the Spanish misrule, all right, is keeping Lady Liberty. I guess the Cuban version of Lady Liberty. I could be misinterpreting this. And the frying pan, I don't quite understand what the frying pan reference is, but it can't be good. So Spanish is keeping Cuban Lady Liberty from getting down here to Cuba and stopping all this anarchy. It's pretty in-depth communication. But, cartoon I mean. But, this is the logic, that it is time for the American people to go down and help out Cuba. There's a huge push because of yellow journalism to go help the Cubans. All right. Now, if we get involved in Cuban affairs, anybody with half a brain realizes that's going to cause a war with Spain that we don't want. Like, why would we want that? Here's another good cartoon. This is Joseph Pulitzer, who realizes people are interested about this, so he starts writing about it all the time. He tries to talk about the actual true facts of kind of how Spain's been kind of rough on the people in Cuba, whereas William Randolph Hearst here is just trying to push it over. There's a weird little cartoon they used to have with this little kid in like a yellow outfit, and that's where the term yellow journalism comes from. I didn't show it to you because I think it's a really confusing cartoon, but that's why they're wearing yellow here. So Pulitzer, again, he's kind of getting in the dirt here with being accused of instigating this war, because he basically is just reporting on the people's desire for involvement in Cuba, because William Randolph Hearst has allowed enough to him for them to think there's an issue that we need to get involved in. So, let me catch you up to where we are. This is the president. He knows yellow journalism's full of crap. He knows that there's no actual horrific stuff being taken place in Cuba the way that yellow journalism is speaking, the way it's talking about. But he also realizes that the American people really want to get involved. All right. So he's like, oh, fine. All right, let's at least talk about this. So he gets his cabinet together, I imagine. All right. So William McKinley gets his cabinet together and he says, all right, so the American people really want us to go help out Cuba. The problem with this is, if we go help out Cuba, it's just going to cause a war here with Spain that we're not really interested in. We don't really want to go to war, so not cool with that. But let's just talk about this, brainstorm. So all his cabinet gets together and they're talking about it. And he's like, all right, if we went to war with Spain, what would America get out of it? All right. So that's the question. So they get a map out here on the table. All right. So it's like, to the victor goes the spoils is the logic. Whoever, if you beat a country in war, you get all their stuff. Especially in a time period of imperialism where America is just trying to be imperialist. We take over Alaska here. We've taken over Hawaii here. So America's already starting to become imperialistic somewhat. So he's like, all right, Billy, if we fight Spain, which I really don't want to do, but if we did, what would we get from them? And Billy's like, all right, well, we would get Cuba. And William McKinley's like, no crap, because first off, we're not going to own Cuba, because if we're getting involved here to help Cuba become independent, like that's what the American people want. Us owning Cuba is not helpful. So no. And he's like, oh, okay. So he's like, McKinley's like, Billy, I'm really going to make fun of Billy here. Billy, who's a fake person. Billy, well, what else they got? Well, they got Puerto Rico. If you tell me another worthless Caribbean island, Billy, I'm going to punch you square in the face. All right. Don't do that anymore. Nobody cares about Puerto Rico. There's nothing they don't have natural resources. There's nothing that we can get out of that. What else they got? Now Billy's starting to get nervous. He's like, all right, well, it's not a Caribbean island. And McKinley's like, all right, that's better. What else do we have? He's like, is this itty bitty little island in the middle of the Pacific called Guam? Like, you can't even see it on this map. All right. McKinley's like, I'm about to come over this desk and I'm about to come at you. All right. So you're telling me Spain has nothing of worth, anything that we want? And he's like, well, they do have something else. And McKinley's like, what is it? And Billy's like, but I don't really want to tell you because I'm afraid you're going to hit me. Oh, I'm going to hit you. Tell me what else they got. And he's like, okay, well, they also have the Philippines. And then he like ducks down and hides. He's like, don't hit me. And McKinley's like, they have the Philippines? Spain has the Philippines? What? You should have led with that. Ooh, you know how awesome it would be to have the Philippines? So immediately, the gears start churning in the mind of William McKinley. So the Philippines is something he really wants. And here's why. So the Philippines, which is right here, is right next to China. We trade very heavily with China. All right. So we already have a refueling station here in Hawaii. All right. So we don't need a refueling station. But if we put half of our Navy, which is a pretty legit Navy at this time, all right, big steel Navy, we put half our Navy here at the Philippines, we can basically intimidate China into giving us preferred treatment. So he's like, yes, I would like to have the Philippines. Yes. So now McKinley's like super excited about this, that in this war that we're going to fight with Spain, that we're going to have the Philippines. Now, before I get back to the fact that they were just talking and now all of a sudden McKinley's super war crazy, all right, let me talk about the Navy. Because in the rest of U.S. history, the Navy is extremely important. America has a pretty dominant Navy now, if not the most dominant Navy. It's made of steel. It's very good. There is some strategy, Navy-wise, that I need to explain to you, and I don't know why this is, but this is a fact. You don't ever want your Navy stationed on your own shores. I don't know why that is. We actually, so we have half our Navy is like, we have half our Navy over in this region here. The other half is over here. All right. Well, if we can take this half and move it over here to the Philippines, and we can just station half our Navy here, that somehow is really beneficial to us. Like, I guess if somebody like tried to attack us, then our Navy could like make it back in time. I guess that's the logic. I'm not a naval expert or whatever, but I do know having areas that are off your coast to like store or just manage your Navy at is preferred. I don't know what the reason for that is, but that's a thing in Navy stuff. So McKinley really wants the Philippines, all right? And he also realizes that Cuba, while we're not going to take over Cuba, that would also be good to put the other half of our Navy. So we have half our Navy in Cuba and half our Navy in the Philippines. That would be sweet. So real quickly, the mentality in America changes to this. This is like Uncle Sam wanting to, imperialism. If we had the Philippines over here and we had Cuba over here, everything would be fantastic. So McKinley's like, yes, let's do this, yes. All right. Now, here's the problem. Spain doesn't want to go to war with us. Like, what? So McKinley, he really does want to go to war with Spain. The problem is that Spain ain't going to attack us. All right. That would be dumb. That does not stop William Randolph Hearst from trying his hardest to get us involved in this war. The only reason it would benefit him is if we're at war, more people buy newspapers. Like, that's like his motivation. Like, so he just makes up stuff. He puts in the newspaper. It's called the Delome letter. Basically, it's a letter that he intercepted from the Spanish that are in Cuba trying to send it back to Spain that says, America don't want none. If America came over here, we'd beat the crap out of them. They're scared. They're weak. Whatever. Just talking trash. And he publishes this, this telegraph he intercepted in the newspaper. Everybody reads it and makes people angrier at the Spanish. Spain's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, we didn't write. So, yeah, they're just making stuff up one side and down the other. Getting people closer to this war. McKinley's all about this war. Now, you can't just declare war on Spain because you want their stuff. That's like uncool and stuff. So, how can you get into a war and be the good guy in the war? Well, if they attacked us, if Spain attacks us, problem solved. Now, is Spain going to attack us? No, that would be dumb. Why in the world would they attack us? Oh, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to poke them with a stick. We do this a lot in wars. We're going to poke them with a stick. Like, hey, Spain, does that bother you? Does that bother you, Spain? Hey, Spain, bet that bothers you, doesn't it? Hey, Spain, does that bother you? Hey, Spain, poke, 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 poke. Until Spain's like, stop it. And then we're like, oh, Spain started it. And then we declare war on them. We've done this before. The Mexican-American War is an example. So that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to poke them with a stick. So what we do is this, if you zoom in on Cuba, the island of Cuba, this is the Havana Harbor. I'll make myself, where do I want to put myself? I'll just put myself down here. All right. This is the Havana Harbor. All right. This is where the Spanish Armada, which is the Spanish Navy, this is where it is docked at. All right. So America, what we're going to do to poke them with a stick to annoy them is we take a modern battleship, the USS Maine, and we sell this is the actual photograph of the USS Maine. We sell this bad boy. And I don't really see where all the guns are on it, but this is a legit battleship. We roll a single battleship down into the Havana Harbor, down in here, just to tick off the Spanish. We're not supposed to be here. We're expecting this battleship to get attacked, and then we can be like, oh, they attacked us, and then we declare war. We're so confident in this, that this will happen, we go ahead and take half of our Navy and sell it out to the Philippines. Because remember, that's what we really want. So we're just going to have our Navy out at the Philippines waiting for this war to happen. So there is like zero chance that you can claim that this war wasn't instigated by us. Like, we 100% instigated this war and tried to look like the good guys. So the USS Maine is just sailing around here. Spain knows we're up to something. They're like, what is America doing? And they see our battleship and they're like, nobody make eye contact with it. And so like all the Spanish Navy's like, oh, what's going on? Oh, nothing over here. And like the USS Maine is just here, just rolling around, just bumping into people's ships. Like, oops, my bad. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Like, just doing stuff to antagonize Spain. Spain refuses to do anything. They refuse to retaliate. They know America's up to something. Then one morning, been down there for about 2 weeks, the USS Maine explodes, killing everybody on board. The United States battleship, USS Maine, explodes into Havana Harbor, killing everybody on board. Immediately, the newspaper, this is William Randolph Hearst newspaper, says, destruction of the warship Maine was a work of the enemy. Everybody believes that Spain just attacked us. Even here, Joseph Pulitzer, all right? He's like, Maine explosion caused by bomb or torpedo. Like what? Why? For 2 weeks, they didn't care, and all of a sudden they're going to attack us? That seems weird. But who cares? We got attacked. And again, back to this one. The narrative is that Spain attacked us and blew up our ship. Later on, after the war is over, and can't really do anything about it, they realize somebody, most likely, it does appear by the wreckage, somebody put a bomb down where all their artillery is and detonated it. Meaning somebody on the ship blew up our own ship. Somebody didn't sneak on and do that. Somebody on the ship blew up the ship. It looks more like sabotage than anything else. The fact that this looks eerily like America murdered a bunch of our own troops just to justify going to war and taking over land on the other side. Did we do that? It is years later before that question even gets thought about. So a couple years later, they get this information and they're like, I don't want to think about that. That seems bad. And then they just don't talk about it. And it's years later, we're looking back on it and we're like, I think we might have like killed our own soldier. Like it's awful. It's awful. But at the time, 100% people believed that Spain attacked us. So we immediately turn around and we declare war on Spain. Look at this picture here. This is Spain. All right. So even though Spain is a European country, and by typical thought process, they would be considered white, look how quickly that Americans turned Spain into dehumanization. Once again, they would make this like a gorilla. So this is supposed to be Spain. All right. They murdered by Spain. Here's the main sailors. These are supposed to be all of the people in the USS Maine. How quickly we go to racism. We go to, let's dehumanize this group of people so we can justify murdering and taking stuff from them. This is Spain. Throughout history, Spain's been like considered white. But when they don't want to think about Spain as being white, because keep in mind, Christopher Columbus was Italian selling from Spain to set up European colonization over here. That's a white guy. Until it's no longer convenient to view one of those countries as white, and then all of a sudden, let's view them as a lesser race. Because racism is make-believe. Race in general is a created thing in human society. Anyway, so once again, we dehumanize Spain, and it is time to fight. Guess what the very first thing that we do is? We're going to take over the Philippines. This is on the other side of the world, over here near the China. It's just surprising. Shocker. The Navy that had been sent over here, all right, had just been sitting out here, waiting to attack. They only got about 3 more days that they can wait until they have to leave and go refuel. Real lucky that attack happened in Cuba. Otherwise, our Navy would not have been in place in time. So, pure coinkydink, meaning there's a lot of evidence that looks like we completely set this whole thing up. We turn around and a very big battle takes place here in the Philippines. It's called the Battle of the Manila Bay. And the American Navy is able to decimate the Spanish ships that were here and secure the Philippines. Then, here's a painting of the Battle of Manila Bay, of them just blowing up the Spanish ships. That brings us back to Cuba. All right. If it's go time, it's go time. The other half of our Navy rolls down to Cuba, and this is a crude drawing. We'll just say it's the Havana Harbor, but it's actually the Santiago. This is where the Spanish Armada is at. The black ships are all the American ships. So the Spanish Armada can only come out of this one at a time, as these ships just sit here and annihilate them one after another. We wipe out the entire Spanish Armada, which is the largest navy on earth, in the Philippines and in Cuba, in a single afternoon, without a single American injury. Now, you're like, wow, like, I don't know a lot about battle, but that seems really one-sided. Oh, it is. It is. And there's a good reason why. There's a very important thing I have not mentioned to you about the Spanish Armada. Their ships are still made of wood. That's right. They thought steel ships weren't a thing. The people who didn't learn that after the American Civil War, or had been resistant to switching their navies over to steel, see what happened in the Spanish-American War here, and we just annihilate the entire Navy, and they're like, okay, well, we're done. We got to go change out our entire Navy now and make it out of steel. So the Spanish Armada, completely made out of wood, get annihilated. Here's a painting. This is at in Cuba, as we just annihilate the Spanish ships as they come out and just eradicate the Spanish Armada. So here we are back at Cuba. We've completely secured Cuba, and we're like, yay, it's ours now, right? No, because we didn't think this one through very much. See, Cuba is an island. We took out all their ships, but their army is still in Cuba. Their army has no way of leaving. So now we have to invade Cuba with an army in order to capture Cuba. This is where the story gets ridiculous and fun because it's so ridiculous. So there is a guy named Theodore Roosevelt. You talk about a man who reinvented himself. Credit, all right? So Theodore Roosevelt, he was born into an incredibly wealthy family. Super rich. He flaunted his wealth. So everybody's like, oh, look at this guy. Like, whatever. He tried to go into politics. He's a progressive guy, but whatever. Just didn't really work out for him. Politics did. I shouldn't say. Being the rich kid who wore all the fancy clothes and everything and shows up, all the working class people he was trying to represent didn't really like him because he's dainty. Like, whatever. Which is not true. He's a big, powerful, athletic guy. But he just looks like a rich guy that doesn't have to do anything. So, realizing that's hurting his image, he reinvents his image. And I'll tell you what, I'm sure other people have done it just as good, but he's like, all right, fine. If I got to reinvent my image, I want to go join the military. I want to go join the special forces. I'm going to have pictures taken of me, like hunting in the woods and stuff like that. He joins the military. He's an effective soldier. He actually works his way up the ranks politically in the military. He becomes the assistant to the Secretary of the Navy when all of this is happening in 1898. This is a photograph of Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt. He goes by Teddy Roosevelt as the Secretary of Navy. Right? And it's actually, this does say 1906, so this is about 10 years old. He was not Secretary of the Navy at this point, but I want to show you a picture of him sitting at a desk, all right? Does he look happy? No. See, when Roosevelt went and became all rough and tumble, he realized, I love being rough and tumble. Like, this is actually who I am. And for all intents and purposes, I think I'm using that term right, he absolutely is a rough and tumble guy and likes the character he was going to try to play is actually more like him. So the first chance he got, all right, when he sees this war is happening, he wants to get out of the office. Because you know where he's happier? Randomly riding a moose. All right. So this is actually picture, like this is the type of pictures that he would have taken. And he's an outdoorsy guy. He is a very powerful personality. He's like a special forces guy in the military who had retired and is an office job. He's going to go back in because he's so high ranking. He's like, I'm going to join the military again. Quits his high ranking job as the assistant to the Secretary of the Navy to join the military. Since he's so high ranking, he can basically do whatever he wants. He's going to create a special forces unit. All right. So a cavalryman, a man that fights on horseback, is equivalent to 10 men on ground. He creates his own special forces unit. This is them, and that is Theodore Roosevelt, all right? And they're called the Rough Riders. This is like the absolute elite from all groups, and they get together. It's a small group of guys, and they're going to do special forces stuff. This is Theodore Roosevelt at the time on his horse. So he wants to be like the spearhead that goes into Cuba and defeats the Spanish military in Cuba. All right. So that's what he thinks the Rough Riders are going to be. They're going to roll in with their horses and all that. Well, there's a little problem. So this here is a map of America. When it is time to fight, because we realize because Cuba's down. Hold on. Where's that? Cuba's down here. All right. To get down to Cuba, everybody's going to leave from Florida. Well, what they're going to try to do is, for the first time ever, when we had to get a big army together, we're just going to train people all around the country where they live. All right. And once they're all trained the same way, then we're going to put them on trains and we're going to bring them down here to Florida. All right. So this was a new attempt that we had. So just train them in their hometowns and then bring them down to Florida and then invade from Florida into Cuba. Here's a problem. When they all got down to Florida, and let me show you. So when they get down here into Florida, they're down here in Florida getting ready to invade Cuba. They all get sick. The American military has learned from this point that the reason they got sick is they're around a bunch of people they weren't used to being around. So they all got like really, really, really sick. This is why when you go on deployment, if you're in the military, you usually get a bunch of shots before you go. It's not really to keep you from getting diseases from where you're going. It's actually to keep you from getting diseases from all the other Americans you're going to be around that have different diseases that you're not familiar with. This is a random picture in the Spanish-American War. Yellow fever, all types of stuff just ravaged the army here in Florida, and they couldn't go invade. Well, Theodore Roosevelt's like, we're going. So Theodore Roosevelt says, we're going to go anyway. And they're like, you have like 150 men. He's like, it's fine. We're just going to get on a boat. And we're going to go over here to Cuba and Rough Riders will do it. Since he was so powerful, they like let him do this, which is ridiculous. So Theodore Roosevelt gets on a boat and heads over here. Now, the problem is that his horses can't fit on the same boat. And they're cavalrymen, all right? So the horses get on a separate boat here to come across to Cuba. Well, I hate to tell you this, the boat with all the horses on it sinks and all the horses die. All right. On their way over here, that's not good, especially when you're a specialized cavalry unit, which means that you need your horses. This is where the story gets absolutely fake. I mean, it's not, but it's ridiculous. So this is a painting of all the Rough Riders coming off their boats, horseless. They come into Cuba. I don't quite understand how to tell you this and make it seem not fake. So, there's an entire Spanish army here. This group of guys right here on the screen, led by Theodore Roosevelt, wreck shop in Cuba. They just run across the mountaintops, I guess, and just wipe out Spanish group after Spanish group. Basically, all the Spanish get terrified that the Rough Riders are just destroying them. I don't understand how this is. It seems dumb. It gets dumber. Just bear with me. The whole Spanish army ends up barricading themselves at the top of this hill called San Juan Hill. Well, when they roll up to the bottom of the hill, meaning the Rough Riders, they're like, come out there or we're going to come up there and kick you in the face. There's a fort at the top of the hill, a whole bunch of machine guns pointed down the hill, like Gatling guns and stuff. And Spain's like, yeah, if you try to come up this hill with no cover, we're going to shoot you. There's no way up there. And he's like, last chance. And Spain's like, yeah, we're not surrendering. So Theodore Roosevelt and his Rough Riders charge up San Juan Hill. Now, there's a famous painting that still hangs today, I believe it's in the White House, of Theodore Roosevelt charging up San Juan Hill with his Rough Riders. What is historically incorrect about this painting? That's right. They ain't got no horses. This is what it really looked like. This is Theodore Roosevelt charging up the hill. They make it to the top of the hill. They invade the fort. They defeat the Spanish. Like, it's so dumb. Like, it's almost like somebody's writing a script and like, oh, we're out of time. Just finish it. And so Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders without horses in a small group basically defeat the entire Spanish army single-handedly. Guess who's a massive hero in America after the Spanish-American War? Theodore Roosevelt. He wanted to be a politician. Oh, he's going to be very popular. And it's going to throw a big monkey wrench into the robber barons who have been buying presidents. But we'll get to that in a later lesson. Once the war is over, all right, and Spain admits that they lost, here's what happens. It's called the Treaty of Paris. That's going to end the Spanish-American War. There's also a Treaty of Paris that ended the American Revolutionary War and the Treaty of Paris that ends the Spanish-American War. It's just a treaty signed in Paris. You'd think they could give it a different name, but they don't. All right. So here's what happens. Step one in this treaty where we like hold a gun to Spain, we're like, you're going to take $20 million from us. Now, why in the world would we pay them $20 million? Well, because we're getting ready to take a whole bunch of stuff from them. If we give them $20 million and we force them to take it, then it's like we bought it from them and we didn't take it from them. So we give them $20 million, all right? We are going to take over the Philippines. We now own that. We're going to make a naval base there in order to intimidate China. We are going to take over Guam and Puerto Rico because, hey, they're going to take it, might as well take it. And those are territories of the United States, still are present day. For Cuba, it's going to be a little different, all right? So we take over the Philippines, we take over Guam, we take over Puerto Rico, all stuff owned by Spain. We give them $20 million. It's the Treaty of Paris. See ya. This is more imperialism. Then we turn to Cuba. So the whole argument, the whole reason people were involved in America is they wanted Cuba to be their own country. So we're like, all right, Cuba, you can be your own country. So this picture here is Uncle Sam looking at, what does he want? Cuba steak, Puerto Rico pig, like Philippines, Sandwich Islands. Basically, he's looking at the menu of stuff he wants to take from Spain. This brings us to Cuba, all right? So we're going to let Cuba be their own country, but we do want to station half of our Navy here in Cuba, in a place called Guantanamo Bay. The Platt Agreement is an agreement we make with Cuba where they're going to give us, not borrow, not rent, whatever. We own a piece of land here called Guantanamo Bay, and we still own it today. That is where we put half of our Navy. The other half are going to be in the Philippines. We own Guantanamo Bay, and we're going to let Cuba be their own country as long as they don't act dumb. This works out fine for a while. We'll have beef later on in the 20th century. But so Cuba gets to be their own country because the American people would never have accepted us taking them over, since the whole point was to let them be their independent country, and they wouldn't have responded well to being taken over. So, to recap real quick, here's what America owns after the Spanish-American War. All right? We own Puerto Rico. We own Cuba. We own Guantanamo Bay, which is just a little tip of Cuba that we own. Guam and the Philippines. All right? This is American imperialism. We're spreading out for militaristic purposes, for natural resources. America is full on into the imperialistic game. All right, that is as far as we're going to get today. I will see you guys tomorrow.